She slept through her entire shift, and her stillness saved a city of 4 million people. Not through heroism, not through training, not through any decision she made at all. She simply closed her eyes, and the world continued. The corridor did not know her name at first. It only knew the sound of her footsteps, which came every night, steady and unhurried, around the perimeter of the facility's lower medical wing, past the supply closets, past the instrument panels, past the sealed room, marked with a yellow symbol that most of the staff had learned not to look at too long. Her name was Lyudmila Sorokina. She was 26 years old. She had been working the overnight shift at the Leningrad nuclear power plant's attached medical observation unit since the spring of that year, 1975, late October. The plant sat on the southern shore of Lake Ladoga, roughly 70 kilometers from the center of Leningrad. 70 kilometers. On a calm night, that felt like nothing. The medical observation unit was not large. It was 4 rooms and a corridor. Its purpose was simple: monitor plant workers for signs of elevated radiation exposure, maintain records, administer basic care, and, critically, keep watch over the facility's secondary monitoring station, which sat at the end of the corridor behind a gray metal door. That monitoring station was not part of the reactor control room. It was a backup, a redundancy, the kind of thing that only mattered when other things stopped mattering. Lyudmila's job was to walk the corridor every hour, check the gauges, log the readings, and under no circumstances touch the manual override panel on the left wall of the monitoring station unless the primary alarm had triggered and central control had not responded within 12 minutes. She had done this for 7 months without incident. 7 months of quiet corridors, 7 months of green lights and normal readings, 7 months of the facility breathing in and out, slow and regular, like something sleeping. And then came the night of October 24th, 1975. Lyudmila arrived for her shift at 11:45 in the evening. She signed the logbook. She put her coat on the hook inside the staff room. She poured herself a glass of water from the metal pitcher that was always left on the counter. The woman going off shift, a nurse named Galina, older, with reading glasses she kept on a chain, told her it had been a quiet night. Nothing unusual. A small coolant leak had been flagged in Sector 7, but maintenance had been notified and it was classified as low priority. Low priority. Those 2 words. Galina left. Lyudmila sat down in the chair at the monitoring desk. She opened the logbook to the correct page. She picked up the pen, and somewhere between the act of holding the pen and the act of writing the date, she fell asleep. Not dramatically, not suddenly. She did not slump. She did not drop the pen. She simply drifted. The way exhaustion works when it has been patient, when it has been waiting for the chair to stop moving. She had worked 3 consecutive overnight shifts before this one. A colleague had called in sick. A supervisor had asked her quietly but clearly if she could manage. She had said yes. Of course she had said yes. It was 1975. It was Leningrad. You said yes. Her breathing slowed. Her hand relaxed. The pen rolled 2 centimeters to the left and stopped at the edge of the logbook. The corridor did not react. The corridor did not know yet what it was holding. At 12 minutes past midnight, the coolant leak in Sector 7 worsened. Not catastrophically, not with alarms and fire. Just a slow, almost polite worsening. A secondary valve, a valve that had been flagged for replacement 6 weeks earlier and had been rescheduled twice due to supply shortages, began to seep, then to drip, then to flow in a thin, steady thread that caught the light like something alive. The pressure in the secondary coolant loop dropped by 4%, then 6, At 6%, the backup monitoring station, the one at the end of Lyudmila's corridor behind the gray metal door, registered an anomaly. A yellow light came on. It blinked. Once, twice, 3 times. Then it held steady. The yellow light was not an emergency. Not yet. It was a precursor, a whisper, the kind of signal that existed precisely so that a human being could look at it and decide what to do before the red light had any reason to exist. In the monitoring station, the yellow light blinked on. In the corridor outside, Lyudmila slept. And here is where the story turns. Because the manual override panel on the left wall of the monitoring station was not just a passive instrument, it was active, sensitive. In the maintenance report filed 3 weeks before this night, a report that Lyudmila had almost certainly never read, a technician named Oleg Marchenko had noted a fault in the panel's circuit relay, a specific fault. If the secondary coolant pressure dropped below 8% while the yellow indicator held, the panel would enter what Marchenko described as an anticipatory ready state. In that state, the override lever, the large one on the left, the one designed for emergency manual shutdown of the secondary cooling loop, could be triggered by a pressure differential as small as a footstep on the floor directly in front of it. A footstep, or a hand reaching for a logbook, or someone leaning forward to check a gauge. Any vibration close enough and the lever would trip. Marchenko had flagged this fault. He had written it in the report. He had recommended the panel be taken offline for repair before the end of October. His supervisor had initialed the report, stamped it, filed it in the correct folder, and the folder had been placed in a cabinet in the administrative office of a man who was, on the night of October 24th, attending his daughter's name day celebration in Pushkin and would not return until Monday. The folder sat in the cabinet. The cabinet sat in the dark office. The office sat 3 floors above where Lyudmila was sleeping. At 12:22, the pressure in the secondary loop dropped to 8.3%. The panel entered its anticipatory ready state. If Lyudmila had been awake, she would have been walking her hourly round. Her scheduled round was 12:20. She would have entered the monitoring station at approximately 12:23. She would have seen the yellow light. She would have leaned toward the panel to read the gauge. Her weight would have shifted forward. Her foot would have pressed the floor, and the lever would have tripped. A manual shutdown of the secondary cooling loop in that state, with the primary system already compensating for the pressure drop, would have triggered an automated failsafe in the primary reactor control system. A failsafe not designed for that sequence, not tested for that scenario. The engineers who later reviewed the incident would describe the probable outcome with careful, measured language. A significant thermal event. That is what they wrote. A significant thermal event with a high probability of containment failure in the secondary structure. Leningrad in 1975 had a population of 4,100,000 people. 4,100,000 people, going about their evenings, sleeping, reading, arguing about small things, loving each other, not knowing, never knowing. The corridor knew. The corridor held the yellow light and the dripping valve and the sleeping woman and the faulty liver, and said nothing, did nothing, simply waited. At 12:31, the primary control room at the plant received an automated low-pressure alert from Sector 7. A technician named Viktor Semyonov, 29 years old, on his 4th coffee of the night, looked at the alert. He looked at the Sector 7 schematic on the board in front of him. He looked at the clock. He picked up the phone. He called maintenance. The maintenance crew that arrived in Sector 7 at 12:45 found the secondary valve seeping steadily, A small problem still containable, still nothing that would appear in any history book under any name. They isolated the valve, they patched it, they logged it. By 1:15 in the morning, the pressure in the secondary loop had stabilized. The yellow light in the monitoring station blinked once and went off. The panel's anticipatory ready state deactivated. The lever sat still. The corridor exhaled. Lyudmila slept until 3:47 in the morning. She woke with a sharp, disoriented jolt, the way you do when your body has slept more deeply than it meant to. She looked at the clock. She looked at the pen on the logbook. She looked at the page where the date was written and nothing else. Her heart was very fast. She stood. She walked to the monitoring station. She opened the gray metal door. Green lights, all green. Normal readings across every gauge. Logbook from the previous shift showing nothing unusual past Galina's final entry. She stood there for a long moment. The corridor behind her was silent. She exhaled. She walked back to the desk. She picked up the pen. She filled in the logbook, hour by hour, with readings she had not actually taken. She had to. She knew she had to. A missing entry in a monitoring logbook at a nuclear facility in the Soviet Union in 1975 was not a small thing. It was the kind of gap that could end a career. The kind of gap that could attract attention from people whose attention you did not want. So she filled it in. Green across the board, normal, quiet, nothing to report. And she was not wrong. The readings had been normal by the time she checked them. The valve had been repaired. The pressure had stabilized. The yellow light had gone. She had not lied precisely. She had simply described the morning that had occurred rather than the night. She finished her shift at 7. She signed out. She put on her coat. She walked out into a Leningrad morning that smelled of river water and cigarette smoke and bread from the bakery on the next street. She did not know about the valve. She did not know about the pressure drop. She did not know about Marchenko's report in the cabinet 3 floors above where she had slept. She knew only that she had fallen asleep and that nothing bad had happened and that she would not do it again. She walked to the bus stop. She waited. She rode home. She slept, really slept, properly slept, until 3 in the afternoon. And the city went on around her. Unknowing, unhurt, 4 million people breathing in, breathing out. The story of what almost happened that night did not emerge immediately. It did not emerge for several years. In 1978, a safety review of the Leningrad plant was conducted as part of a broader Soviet assessment of nuclear facility protocols following concerns raised internally, concerns that were not, at the time, shared with the public or with the international community, or with essentially anyone outside a small circle of engineers and party officials. During that review, Marchenko's October 1975 report was found. Specifically, it was found by a safety engineer named Dmitry Volkov, who had been tasked with cross-referencing all unfulfilled maintenance recommendations from the preceding 4 years. Volkov read the report. He read the description of the fault. He read the recommended action. He noted the date, October 3rd, 1975. He checked the maintenance logs. The valve repair in Sector 7, October 24th, 25th, 1975. He checked the pressure records for that night. 8.4% drop at 12:22. He sat very still for a moment. Then he pulled the monitoring logbook for the night of October 24th through 25th, 1975. Lyudmila's handwriting. Even, regular, green across the board, normal readings, hourly. He looked at the clock times. He looked at the signature. He looked at the pressure records again. If those readings were accurate, Then a nurse had been standing in front of a faulty panel in its anticipatory ready state during the exact window of maximum risk, and nothing had happened. He wrote two things in his review notes. First, Nurse Sorokina present at monitoring station during critical window. No incident. Outcome, normal. Then, after a pause you can almost feel in the white space around the words, he wrote, probability of unintended lever activation had nurse performed standard gauge inspection, assessed as high. High, he did not write what that meant. He did not have to. In the language of Soviet safety review, high was its own sentence, its own paragraph, its own silence. Volkov submitted his review. The review was classified. The recommendation was made to repair or replace the affected panel type across all facilities of this class. The recommendation was initialed, stamped, filed. Lyudmila was not contacted. She was not interviewed. She was not, as far as any available record shows, ever told what her sleeping had meant. She continued to work at the facility for another 2 years. She transferred in 1970 to a hospital in central Leningrad. She married in 1979. Her name changed. The records at that point become harder to follow. The Leningrad plant continued to operate. It would go on operating until 1990, when the first of its reactors was shut down. The last unit was decommissioned in 2020. 45 years. During those 45 years, it generated power for a significant portion of the Leningrad region. During those 45 years, the night of October 24, 1975, remained a footnote in a classified internal review. A footnote about a valve, about a fault, about readings that were normal across the board, about a nurse who had not, technically, done anything at all. The corridor held this the way corridors hold things, silently, without judgment, without the ability to tell anyone what it knew. There is something almost unbearable about this kind of story, not because it is sad, not because anyone died, but because of how thin it is, how thin the line between normal and catastrophic. The line in this case was sleep. Lyudmila Sorokina, 26 years old, exhausted from 3 consecutive overnight shifts, sat down in a chair with a pen in her hand, and the world narrowed to her breath. In, out, and the lever did not trip, and the failsafe did not trigger. And the thermal event, the significant thermal event with high probability of containment failure, remained a phrase in a classified folder that most people never read. There is a concept in systems theory in the study of how complex systems fail called a negative event. Not negative as in bad, negative as in absent, a thing that did not happen, a decision that was not made, an action that was not taken. Most safety analysis focuses on what went wrong, what was touched, what was triggered, what cascaded. But Volkov's review, buried as it was, pointed at something else. It pointed at the negative event, at the absence of footsteps in a corridor at 12:23 in the morning, at the absence of a hand reaching for a gauge, at the absence of weight shifting forward on a tile floor. The city of Leningrad was saved, if it was saved, by a collection of absences. And here the story opens into something larger, because Lyudmila was not the only absence that night. The folder was absent from the supervisor's desk. The supervisor was absent from his office. The repair crew was present. Viktor Semyonov made his call, maintenance arrived, the valve was fixed. But what if Viktor had been slower to notice, or faster? What if the maintenance crew had arrived at 12:15 instead of 12:45, before the pressure dropped to its critical threshold, before the panel entered its ready state? Then the panel would have been in its ready state when Lyudmila woke at 12:23. Then she would have walked in. Then the lever would have tripped. What saved the city was not one absence. It was a precise sequence of arrivals and absences, timed by chance, held together by exhaustion and bureaucratic delay, and a name-day party in Pushkin. The coolant dripped. The pressure dropped. Victor picked up his phone. The maintenance crew drove through a dark facility in an October that smelled of exhaust and cold water. And in the monitoring room at the end of the corridor, Lyudmila breathed. In, out, in, out. The corridor held all of this. The corridor did not choose. It simply was the space where all of it happened, the space between the desk and the faulty door, between the yellow light and the sleeping hand, between what was and what almost was. In 1986, Chernobyl happened. The world learned, slowly and terribly, what a significant thermal event with containment failure could mean. It learned the word exclusion zone. It learned the weight of that word, 30 kilometers. Then further, the animals moving back into the silence, the trees that turned red and did not fall, the towns emptied of everything except the sound the wind makes when there are no people to interrupt it. Leningrad is not inside an exclusion zone. It never was. Its streets still run down to the Neva. The buildings still stand, the ones that stood through the siege, through everything. 4 million people, more now, still wake and go to work and argue and love each other. Some of them have no idea. Most of them have no idea. Volkov, the engineer who found the connection in 1978, died in 1993. He had not spoken publicly about his review, so far as can be determined. He lived in a modest apartment in Leningrad, then St. Petersburg. He retired in 1991. He is remembered by his family, presumably, in the ways that people are remembered. Marchenko, the technician who wrote the warning report that was never acted on, lived until 2004. He gave one interview in the early 1990s to a small technical journal about Soviet-era nuclear safety. He mentioned the report, he mentioned the fault. He did not mention Lyudmila. He may not have known her name. He may not have known what her sleep had meant. Photorealistic image of an old Soviet technical journal open on a wooden table, black and poured. He may not have known her name. He may not have known what her sleep had meant. And Lyudmila Sorokina, wherever she was by then, did not know either. Only that she had once fallen asleep in a chair with a pen in her hand and woken to green lights and walked out into a morning that smelled of river water and bread, and that nothing, as far as she ever knew, had happened at